Hello, and welcome back to another online workshop by Open Road Limited. My name is Martin, and during this workshop we'll be learning about carbon literacy, the carbon cost of the decisions we make, and what steps we can take to make better and more informed choices in the future. By the end of this session, you should have a sound, basic understanding of carbon and the ability and motivation to reduce your carbon emissions. There will be a few fun activities you can join in with at home, and at the end of the session, we'll be inviting you to make a pledge and add it to our Miro board. This online workshop is based on an in-person session we delivered in the village of Fitty as part of Safe Harbour Open Sea, a culture collective project funded by Creative Scotland. At points throughout the video, the pause symbol will appear on your screen. When you see this symbol, you might want to take a moment to pause the video and gather your thoughts, or to complete on-screen activities. If you're watching this video on Open Road's YouTube channel, you can enable closed captionings from the video menu, and you can also use the progress bar to navigate through the different chapters within today's workshop. At Open Road, we're committed to delivering relevant, accurate, and interesting work. So please get in touch with any feedback. You can reach us on most social media platforms, and you can also find all of our contact details on our website at www.openroadltd.co.uk. Now, let's get started. So, I'm going to try to avoid getting too technical, but in order to talk about the impact our choices have on the planet and how we can change this, first we need to cover some basics. What is carbon? Carbon emissions is a term we use to refer to carbon dioxide and other gaseous carbon compounds which are released into the atmosphere. Some people may use carbon emissions and greenhouse gases interchangeably. But greenhouse gases often covers a wider spectrum of harmful gases emitted into the atmosphere, not just those which contain carbon. What is a carbon footprint? Our carbon footprint is the measure of how much carbon we create through our lifestyle choices. At the end of this section, I'll share a link to my favourite carbon footprint calculator. What is carbon literacy? The Carbon Literacy Project defines carbon literacy as an awareness of the carbon costs and impacts of everyday activities, and the ability and motivation to reduce emissions on an individual, community, and organisational basis. If we are going to make progress in decreasing our carbon emissions, we must embrace that this is a tough and complex topic. Most of us are not scientists, and life is full of variables. If we treat carbon literacy as an exact science, this could become quite stifling to our progress. Making the right choices is often about using the knowledge you have at that time, or taking a best estimate at the consequences of our decisions. As well as this, we need to balance the carbon cost of any decision with other ethical and moral factors. In other words, this is a tough and complex topic, and making mistakes is okay. I'm still learning, and I still make plenty of mistakes. Do what you can, keep an open mind, and keep on learning. That's all we can ask. What is net zero? Net zero is a term used to define when the greenhouse gases going into an atmosphere is balanced by removal out of the atmosphere. The Scottish Government has set a goal to reach net zero by 2045. This is very ambitious, and is 5 years ahead of the global target. This target is set in Scottish legislation, so it's the law. We should also acknowledge Scotland has an interim target in 2030, by which point we should have reduced our carbon emissions by 75% in comparison to 1990. That target is in under 8 years and forms one of the toughest statutory targets in the world. These targets, and the work which is already in motion, are a brilliant step forward. However, the targets are not perfect and all-encompassing. This is an example of how complex this topic can be. Not everyone is happy with these targets due to the exemptions, loopholes, and exceptions around industries such as imports and international air travel. What is offsetting? You might be familiar with the idea of offsetting your carbon footprint, balancing your carbon emissions through taking a positive action like planting trees. But the focus on offsetting will only go so far. To create change, radical action is needed, and we must reduce the emissions we create in the first place. What is adaptation? I'll try to keep this video as positive as possible. But lastly, for this section, we must acknowledge that the human race has already done significant, irreversible damage to our atmosphere, or at least damage which could take many thousands of years for nature to repair. This is why we must also explore adaptation. We must find ways to live with the damage we've created. We'll explore adaptation more later in the video, but it involves altering the way we live so we can protect ourselves from the ever-changing atmosphere. This includes steps like rerouting and reinforcing our infrastructure, investing in flood defenses, altering our diet and food habits to reflect the change in soil quality, and farming. Know your footprint. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to encourage you to measure your carbon footprint. My favorite site for this is the WWF website. It's quick and easy to get an estimate of your footprint, but there are several other sites available which may ask more or fewer questions. So feel free to shop around and see which one suits you best. The address for the WWF footprint calculator is on your screen now, or you can find a link in the description box below. In order to understand and reduce our carbon footprint, we must first understand the component parts which make it up. I'm going to put some images on screen which show some of the different factors that contribute to our carbon footprint. See if you can work out what each one represents, or if you'd rather try and see how many you can figure out on your own before you see the images, then pause the video right now. How many did you get? So, we've got food. Within this topic, we actually have a few issues to consider. Different foods have different carbon costs. Plant-based items tend to create fewer carbon emissions than meat products. However, buying local also helps greatly reduce your impact by reducing the transport footprint of your meals. Food waste is another important topic. If we measure the carbon cost of global food waste, it would rank as the third largest country in the world. By only buying or preparing what we need, it can help prevent excess wastage and, in turn, reduce our footprint. Heating. With the increase in heating costs, many of us are acutely aware of how we heat our homes. Making clever choices around how and when we heat our homes, as well as insulating our homes to keep them warmer, can help reduce costs and also reduce our carbon footprint. Electric and utilities. In addition to heating, we use electric, gas, or other sources of power for jobs around the house and in our workplaces. This includes lighting, to charging devices and cooking. An increased number of energy suppliers are now offering electricity from 100% renewable sources. Here's a quick quiz for you. Who is the largest power consumer in Scotland? That's right, it's Scottish Water, which brings us nicely onto our next topic. Water. Processing water into the potable or drinking water which flows from our taps takes a huge amount of energy. Every time we use water, we're contributing to our carbon footprint. There are easy steps we can take to conserve water, such as turning off taps when not in use, fixing leaking or dripping faucets, and collecting rainwater for tasks like watering plants. Waste. Many people don't think about it, but disposing of waste has a carbon cost. Recycling has a carbon cost too. Reducing our waste is an essential step in reducing our footprint. Reducing packaging, upcycling, or repurposing old items, and overall reducing the amount we put in our bins. Recycling also only goes so far. A friend of mine once said, "Recycling is a great place to start, but an awful place to stop." Travel. Hopefully many of you identified travel as a source of carbon emissions and a contributing factor to our carbon footprint. Travel can make up roughly 50% of an average person's footprint in the Western world. Whether commuting, traveling for work, going on holiday, or just nipping to the supermarket, the miles we travel can really add up. So, how can we create change? How can we have a positive impact on carbon emissions? Firstly, and perhaps most obviously, we can reduce our emissions and in turn, our footprint. We can travel less, change what we eat to a lower impact diet, such as cutting out red meat, or by buying sustainable products and recycling them afterwards. But we need to do more than that. Sometimes we need to think beyond our own actions. Take a moment to pause the video here and think about your scope of influence. What impact can you have on other people or organizations around you? We all have a chance to reach beyond our own carbon footprint. This is what we call our carbon handprint. While we aspire to make our footprint as small as possible, we should aim to make our handprint as large as we can. If you live with others, perhaps you can discuss some easy changes you can put in place around the home to live in a more eco-friendly way. This could be anything from clearer labeling on the recycling bins to coordinating food shops to reduce food waste. Beyond your household, you may have friends, relatives, or neighbours who you can set a good example to. From placing solar panels on your roof to pushing for a community change, such as improved recycling facilities or electric car charging points. Your actions may inspire others around you or make it easier for them to make those same choices in the future. Most workplaces now have a green team or eco committee, which you can get involved in. Or if you're in charge of any purchasing or procurement, you can consider the green credentials of any item or quote before making your purchase. Even asking for the environmental credentials helps raise awareness around these issues. Beyond your workplace, you may have social events, hobbies, or other groups and committees where you can have a positive impact. We can influence the businesses and services we use on a daily basis by refusing bags and single-use items like straws, or supporting the sustainable ranges they offer. We can be an advocate for change through speaking to your local authorities and MPs. Lastly, for this section, I think Whitney Houston said it best when she said, "I believe the children are our future." Powerhouse singers aside, supporting and educating the children in your life to make better environmental choices can have an effect which far outlives your own impact. I know there's a lot of information here. Feel free to pause the video again if you wish and reconsider your circle of influence before we continue with today's training. As we discussed earlier in the video, sadly, we've already caused a great deal of irreversible damage to the planet we live on, and adaptation is all about learning to mitigate that damage. There are plenty of changes which we can see taking place around us every day. For example, changes in the way we build and adapt property. New developments typically include more green space than previously. While green space is a good proactive step in our environmental goals, it helps offset carbon and allows wildlife to thrive. It also aids us in managing the damage we've done so far. Permeable surfaces and natural green space allows excess water to drain away, especially useful with an increase in erratic weather. There's a drive towards 15-minute communities, which offer many benefits. Rather than centralizing all public services, placing key services and infrastructure within a 15-minute journey of most homes helps reduce our travel footprint and can help regenerate communities it serves. But it also makes access a lot easier, meaning core services should be easier for people to access in all weather conditions. Likewise, a focus on interconnected transport allows for a more resilient infrastructure, which is resistant to disruption. Adaptation Scotland have a really great website which explores this in more detail. I'd particularly encourage you to explore their interactive Climate Ready Places resource, which allows you to see how some of the adaptation changes may take shape. Adaptation Scotland's website is on the screen now, and the link to their website and Climate Ready Places can be found in the description box below. That's been a lot of information so far. So, time for a bit of fun. On the left are 6 activities or products, and on the right are 6 carbon costs. Can you match the activity with how much carbon it costs on average? Are you ready for the answers? Let's work our way through the options then, starting with the lowest emissions. 280 grams. The smallest carbon cost on the screen. What activity do you think it belongs to? Sending one small letter on recycled paper costs around 280 grams on average. There are, of course, plenty of variables based on the exact weight, paper type, and even how full the delivery van is. If you want to be really particular, the cost of delivering that letter is actually dependent on the diet of the postal workers. If the person doing the delivery round has a diet with a high carbon cost, the energy burned during their round will also have a higher carbon cost. Anyway, let's not go any further down that rabbit hole. The average cost is 280 grams, and I'm getting all of my measurements from a book by Mike Berners-Lee called How Bad Are Bananas? Did you get the first one right? Next up, 330 grams. Do you have an idea? A load of laundry at 30 degrees will use around 330 grams of carbon. Moving right along, the next 2 figures are also quite close together at 1 and 1.1 kilograms. Have you got 2 activities in mind? And do you think they're the right way round? The lower of the 2 is taking a bath heated by gas boiler, costing around 1 kilogram of carbon, while creating a pint of UK's cow's milk costs around 1.1 kilograms. Now, we're on to the bigger figures and our final reveal. You'll be pleased to know that the rice comes in at the lower spot, producing around 4 kilograms of carbon to grow a kilogram of it and deliver it to our shelves, which puts making a pair of men's jeans at the top of today's list. How do you feel about these results? Have any of them really shocked you? Okay, it's time for a quick stock take. Pause the video here and take a moment to think about the things you already do to reduce your carbon footprint. Do you buy local? Do you recycle? Do you buy secondhand or re-gift? Or are you part of a lending library? What positive transport choices do you already make? As you work your way through your list, be proud of the steps you've taken so far and take a moment to reflect on these. What drove you to make these changes? What are the positives in these changes? Does the homegrown or local fruit and veg taste better? Are these steps still working well for you, or is there something you can adapt to make it easier for you to keep up with these commitments? This workshop is based on an in-person session we delivered in the village of Fitty at the tail end of last year. At the moment, we're exploring what group actions we can take as a community and how we can monitor our collective impact. Can you think of a group action you might be able to take with others around you? Now, to finish today's session, I'd like to invite you to make a pledge, a small action or a big action, which you can make today to reduce your carbon footprint. In the description box below, you'll find a link to our Miro board, where you can add your carbon pledge and see other people's contributions too. Thank you for joining us for today's carbon literacy session. We hope you found today's workshop useful and engaging. Remember, when it comes to making the right carbon choices, all we can ask is for you to try your best. If you have any thoughts on today's session, please do get in touch with us via our website or on social media.